Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Zafirowski, bonjour. In your presentation, you explained to us how painful it was for you. These are your exact words, how difficult, how agonizing, and you explained your empathy, all your words. Given that, I would ask if you would be so kind as to stay for the next hour so that you can hear from all these people who are actually suffering the pain that you say that you have.
Order! 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 And ask the crowd to please respect Mr. Mulcair's time.
Ma première question de fond, M. Zafirowski, est la suivante. Vous avez fait une demande auprès des tribunaux pour avoir 45 millions de dollars pour payer des bonus de rétention aux cadres et dirigeants. Vous venez de dire en réponse à une question que, selon l'avis juridique que vous auriez obtenu, ça ne servait à rien même de demander que les primes de départ, de severance, soient payées parce que vous saviez d'avance que les tribunaux allaient dire non. Comment ça marche, ça? Comment vous pouvez savoir d'avance qu'ils vont dire oui à 45 millions de dollars pour vous et les autres cadres et que vous présumez, sans même essayer, qu'ils vont dire non pour les primes de départ? How can you know in advance that they're going to say yes to 45 million in bonuses to retain senior employees, and you don't even try to get the money for the severance payments?
The approach internally on continuing to fulfill obligations to existing employees in the retention plan based on studies of companies all over the world, we thought it was absolute minimum requirement. Creditors who have the same expectations as employees, they would like to optimize what the company owes to them, also believed. They were very much in active discussions of what are the right things to do to be able to have the proceeds to be able to fulfill the greatest percentage of previous obligations.
Mr. Zafirowski, are you going to stay for the second hour? Because I have places right here for you and for Mr. Tay. If you'd like to hear from the people, Mr. Pachetti was right. The order was decided by the chair. That's fine, but they are here. And it'll take you 1 hour to hear from them. And I think that would be useful, given the fact that you've described how painful this has been for you. This might be a way for you to expiate some of that pain. And I'm inviting you to stay here for another hour if that's possible.
I mean, sir, I will consider that. I've spoken to many employees. I still continue to speak to many current and former employees. Would you like to listen to them instead of speaking to them? Would you like to listen to them? The speaking comment was a combination of listening and speaking, but I will consider that. Thank you.
Well, we'd be very thankful to you if you did. Now, we're trying to also find out what the actual state of play is here. Is it possible that we've seen you've been on the Hill in recent months since the January filing? Have you been up here on Parliament having any meetings since January?
We've had a number of meetings: November, December, January, in March, correct?
Here on the Hill. Have you met with any ministers or spoken with any ministers?
Yes, private discussions, but yes.
Yes, well, actually, we get to ask you about them here. Who were those discussions with? Which ministers did you meet? You have to answer.
I mean, we've spoken with a number of them: Mr. Finance, Industry,
Mr. Clement
Trade,
is Industry. Mm-hmm. Who else have you spoken to? The Prime Minister?
Mr. Flaherty.
Mr. Flaherty.
I've met the Prime Minister as part of Industry, but I've not spoken to him specifically with respect to Nortel.
And you have to answer this question. What was the nature of those conversations?
I mean, there was a status of the company, status of the industry.
That's general. And, I'd like something more specific.
And also any potential areas of collaboration.
Did you talk to them about the fact that if you don't pay severance, people will get employment insurance, and that's a liability for the state as opposed to the company?
I mean, that certainly was one of the items. I was also discussing areas of more substantive, if you will, assistance. But those discussions did not end up in any concrete.
Specifically, what was the nature of your discussion with regard to severance and EI, and with whom?
There was not a specific discussion of pension or severance, but there was a discussion, obviously, the impact on employees. They expect a reductions if were to file, but we did not have a specific discussion of severance.
Did you discuss severance versus EI with Mr. Clement or with Mr. Flaherty?
I said there was not a specific discussion on severance. There was discussions on the overall impact on employees
Did they offer anything to you with regard to the existing schemes under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act? In other words, was there any attempt by the Canadian government to get involved? I noticed that they're not there at the hearings, but the U.S. government is.
No, we've been very active discussions with the EDC, but we did not come to areas of direct assistance there, no.
On several occasions during your presentation, you talked about increasing the value to be available for all stakeholders.
Correct.
Do you consider the people in this room, your former employees, to be amongst those
Oh,
stakeholders?
absolutely. If it did not come clear,
Okay.
pensioners, current former employees,
But right now, they're in the same position as a distressed bondholder on Wall Street, aren't they? They're relegated to the back of the pack. Has your analysis and the decisions that you've taken been a function, depending on which countries in which you put yourself in bankruptcy protection, has that been a function of what would be available from various states and governments in those different jurisdictions, whether you put yourself into bankruptcy or you tried to make it a going concern? Because if it's sold, if it's protected in bankruptcy, you can do things like pay yourselves $45 million in bonuses, but if it's a going concern, it's going to be under a different light, isn't it?
that's not really true.
Yep.
But I'll make a comment on the first one. There's no one back of the line.
I think that
What are you,
there is. There are
supplier?
secured creditors out there, and the employees are not secured
No,
creditors.
there's no secured creditors, sir. So
Right
there's-
now.
There's no one back. This is you have active, ongoing employees. There's consultants or parties that are serving the various stakeholders, but there's no secured creditors.
Well, you
30
say that-
seconds, Mr.
You say that there's no back of the line, but I put it to you again, and I'll end where I started, that the people who are in back of you are in the back of the line because they don't get to ask for $45 million in bonuses. They don't get their severance. They're not getting anything, and they're watching their pensions be whittled away. So I invite you again to spend the next hour of your time listening to these people because they're the ones who are feeling the pain. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mulcair. Thank you. I'll just remind members in the audience that it is for members' time for question. I just ask you to please respect that. We'll go to Mr. McCallum, please.